Someone I'm very close to acquired a frog recently, and it was narrowly rescued from a nightmarish death. So a couple of weeks ago, a very close and dear companion of mine expressed interest in acquiring 2 tree frogs as pets. She's very into animals, but not really a lizard person, so frogs seemed like a good call. And after seeing The Amazing Spider-Man, I can't say I'm much of a lizard person either. Too scary. If they become human-sized, what are we gonna do? Nothing. There's nothing we can do. She told me ahead of time that she'd already decided to name one of the frogs Yoda and the other Kermit, so naturally I wholeheartedly approved. And so it happened that one day I accompanied her to the pet store in search of frogs. It turned out that they only had one Australian white tree frog at the store that day, so my companion decided to purchase that one and wait until later to get the second frog. So they put the little guy in a little cardboard box with a little carrying handle, and apparently everything's little now, I don't know why I said that. And after getting all of the necessary trappings for raising a frog, a 10-gallon terrarium with a heat lamp, coconut husk bark, a fake little tree item, and some mealworms for food, which look like maggots and roll around a lot in kind of a creepy way, but apparently frogs are into them, so yeah. And then we were on our way, and we took the frog back to my dear new frog owner's house to set it up in her room. We put the terrarium together, snapping all the pieces into place and attaching the heat lamp to a timer so that it would always turn on during the day and off at night. We couldn't find the safety locking pin for the front door of the tank that swings open, but the little latch that was already on there seemed to work okay and it stayed closed, and I'm sure it'll be fine. I hope. My companion prepared the bark and put it on the floor of the tank, and we set up the little fake tree in a corner, and then we put in a little food tray and water bath. And there was this thick foam board that came with the whole setup that I think was designed to look and feel like the side of a tree for the frog to climb on and whatnot. And it was supposed to be pushed back against the back wall of the tank. But it had these 2 little indents cut into the back of it that went all the way down the length of it, so that when it was pressed against the back glass wall of the tank, it left these 2 little slots in between the glass and the foam that went all the way down from the top of the tank to the bottom. Yoda's new owner and I consulted each other on the matter and decided that the slots were too thin for him to accidentally fall down into and get stuck. Side note, she decided to name this first frog Yoda, as you may have realized by now, because we assumed he would be the older and wiser of the 2 when the second one eventually comes into play. The tank looked great, and at last we took Yoda out of his box. Yoda is a round little fellow, fairly large for a tree frog, I'd say, having no knowledge of what tree frogs are like and what size they should be. And he's pretty docile. Pretty docile, I would say. Is it docile or docile? I've never known. Though he knows how to show a little sass, I'll tell you. And at last he's handed off to me, and so I hold him and greet him. Just to be clear, I had spoken to him in his box during the whole ride back from the pet store to describe his new home to him and his new owner and whatnot. And he's a quiet conversationalist, I would say, but he says a lot with his breathing. Just a lot of meaning conveyed there. But now I want to be properly introduced to him, so I hold him in my hands and look at him and introduce myself to him, or at least I start to, when suddenly he leaps out of my hands and just smacks head on into my chest. And it looks something like this. Hey Yoda, I'm Parker, and okay! Luckily I was able to get a hold of him again quickly, and things were okay. Finally, we put him in his tank, closed it up, and said goodbye to him, since we had plans to go to the beach the next day, and he would be on his own for a bit. Yoda crawled right up to the top of his tank and sat on top of the board, motionless, right next to one of the little slots that I talked about earlier, but as I said before, they were too thin for him to fall into, so we weren't worried. About a day and a half later, we returned to the house and walked in to check on Yoda. But we were a little concerned when, in the tank, we saw no Yoda. We frantically looked through the glass from every possible angle, hoping to spot him somewhere, but we couldn't. And at last, fearing the worst, I checked the back of the tank, specifically the 2 slots. And somehow, in the darkness, I saw Yoda, curled up into a smaller form than I ever knew was possibly physically achievable for him, in the very bottom of one of the slots. Stuck. My companion, who was at this point naturally very worried, asked, "Is he back there?" And trying to remain very calm, I said, "Okay, yes." And she had to walk out of the room, because things were getting serious now, and she feared a dark fate, as we all did. I remained in there and started to pull the foam away from the glass wall, but Yoda wasn't moving, or blinking, which was not a good sign for life. I was really starting to get scared at this point. I could feel my heart racing faster and faster. I mean, I was beginning to think that Yoda may have become one with the Force, if you know what I mean. And finally, desperately, with just a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach, like a rock sitting in there, and visions of a frog funeral playing in my head, what songs we might play for him, and what scented candles we might light in his honor. I don't know why scented candles, but that just seems right at a funeral for a frog. All that's going through my head. I finally poke him just slightly in the back, and he seems to move. And then as he seems to move, I notice the little in-out motion of his neck, indicating that he's breathing. And so I start to nudge him up out of the back corner of the tank. I'm relieved, and I start talking to Yoda, because I'm so thankful that he's alive. I say, Yod, what are you doing, man? Get out of, come on, get up out of here. Stop messing around, you jokester. Translation. Thank the sweet, merciful heavens you're alive. I never would have forgiven myself. Please never scare me like that again, young man. And my dear companion comes rushing back into the room and talking to Yod, too, apologizing and thanking me for rescuing him. She's gonna be a good frog mama, I can tell. I mean, it was touch and go there for a second. Probably one of the most suspenseful moments in my life over the past couple of weeks. Not like my whole life, but it was big. I'm so glad to be able to give this story a happy ending, honestly. We removed the accursed foam board from the tank forever, and Yoda's been living happily there ever since. We also recently acquired Kermit and introduced him to the habitat, and Yoda hasn't eaten him yet, so things are good. So I guess the lesson here would be, never give up on a life. Even if the poor soul seems very near death, or very completely dead, just stay positive and do everything you can to ensure the safety of that creature, whatever it may be. Because if the roles were reversed, I'm sure you'd want it to do the same for you. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to go pray to the tree frog gods to thank them for allowing sweet little Yoda to pull through, even in his darkest hour, when he was stuck back there like James Franco playing Aaron Ralston in 127 Hours, the motion picture. Side note, I wonder what the tree frog gods look like. Are they like ghostly blue frogs dressed in Jedi robes that give living frogs advice and tell them to use the Force? I hope so. Anyway, that's it for now. Oh, and before I go, I do want to give a shout out to my good buddy and roommate. He was actually present in the story that I told in my last vlog where I had the cereal box and I took out the Star Wars toy and I had mixed feelings about it. He was there for that event and he was an integral part of that story. And unfortunately, I totally didn't mention him, which is not respectful, so I want to apologize to him formally. And I want to thank him for understanding. Hopefully. I'll catch you later.